Well, hello, I'm Congressman Michael McCaul, and I want to welcome you to our informational discussion about the current state of play. I'm pleased and honored to have Texas Workforce Commissioner Errand Dermerson, and from the Governor's Office, Economic Development and Tourism, from the Governor's Office, Adriana Cruz. Thank you two for joining me today. First, I'd like to kind of give a state of play what's happening at the national level in the Congress, and then I want to turn it over to the Texas Workforce Commission and the Governor's Office. As y'all may know, in Congress, we have passed 3 major bills dealing with COVID-19. First one providing $8 billion for research and development in a treatment and cure for COVID-19 and a vaccine. Second phase, providing free tests for all Americans and also paid leave for those who are struck by the virus as well. Third phase, a very important phase, a $2.2 trillion package that gives direct check benefits to low to middle income working families, $1,200 per adult and $500 per child. Those checks you should be receiving if you haven't already this week. Big provision, the small business provisions, $350 billion designed to keep our economic engine, our small businesses, afloat during this hard time. They suffered through no fault of their own. These are forgiveness loans that any business can apply for with their local banker. And for those who don't qualify, there are various tax provisions to defer payroll taxes until next year. So far, within 2 weeks of the passage of the CARES Act, we have already processed over 1 million loans and are getting very close to the $350 billion mark. We need to replenish that soon, and the administration has asked for an additional $250 billion to keep the Paycheck Protection Program alive and well. 2 more final items, $100 billion to our hospitals to keep them afloat. We want to make sure our healthcare infrastructure can absorb the patients that we anticipate and are receiving due to COVID-19 and what we anticipate to be the surge in COVID-19 over the next 2 weeks or so. And then finally, $150 billion to distressed industries like hospitality, like airline. And for Texas, I think very important, we were able to include the energy sector, which has been hit very hard by this economic crisis, and also by the flooding of the markets by Russia and Saudi Arabia. Good news on that, I talked to the Saudi ambassador yesterday. The OPEC plus countries have now reached an agreement to cut production and cut the flooding of the markets to save our energy sector that's so vital here in the state of Texas. So with that, love to turn it over to our Workforce Commissioner, Errand Dermerson. Errand?
Good. Thank you, Chairman, for the introduction, and thank you for all that you're doing. We know it's a lot of tough work, and we don't take that for granted. We appreciate what you're doing day in and day out to make this better for not only our world, but the United States and Texas in particular. Thank you for everything that you're doing. It's got to be pretty tough out there. Adriana from the Governor's Office and I quite often use this word unprecedented, and that's what we're experiencing in this particular time, but we appreciate the leadership. For those that may be joining us later on this call, those that will be viewing this call, I want to thank those employers out there for everything that they're doing, for their investment in the state, for what they've done day in and day out, and simply that's just kind of taking care of business. They've done that over and over for us, and we don't take that for granted. Governor Abbott appointed me to this position in August of 2019, and I have the pleasure and privilege of serving as the commissioner that represents the employers here in Texas. And so we want to make sure that we are responsive to our employer needs out here. This is a critical and crucial time right now. And so to that point, we have 4 employment attorneys on board, Valissa Chapa, Elsa Ramos, Mario Hernandez, and then Tommy Simmons, my senior general counsel. And we've been answering questions, relevant questions, live questions, to make sure that our Texas employers have access to the best information available. And so, Chairman McCaul, we appreciate you doing this today, because it allows us to get the word out once again in regards to questions that they may have. They've been fielding calls over the past 3 or 4 weeks, and it's been an unprecedented amount of calls as well in that regard. Governor Abbott took swift action, and Adriana will talk about some of that, but he went right away and waived the 1-week waiting period for unemployment claims. To that point, Texas Workforce Commission, we turned around and waived the search requirement that was required as well. And Governor asked for designation at the federal level. And thank you, Chairman, for the work where he's granted an SBA designation. And we are in a position now to take full advantage of those programs that are out there that you guys have passed that allow our employers to participate in that space. And so again, thank you for everything you're doing. We appreciate being on the call, and we look forward to answering some of the questions that our Texas employers have that's out there. Thank you for the invitation.
No, thank you, Commissioner Dermerson. And we did include additional unemployment benefits in the package in addition to the second bill that we passed as well. And so thank you for those great remarks. And next, I'd like to turn to the governor's office, Adriana Cruz.
Yes, Chairman McCaul, thank you so much for inviting me here today for this conversation. And thank you for your leadership to the country and also to the great state of Texas. I am the Executive Director of the Economic Development and Tourism Division of the Office of Governor Abbott. And I'm very happy to be here today and have this discussion and answer some questions. Governor Abbott appointed me to this position in October. I took the position in December, and it's my honor to lead the state's economic development efforts, which today are needed even more than ever before. As Commissioner Dermerson said, these are unprecedented times. We have not seen a situation like this in the past, and our team at the Economic Development and Tourism Office has been fielding calls from Texas businesses, from folks in the music industry, the tourism industry, the film industry, all of the critically important industries across our state, answering questions, trying to provide guidance as to resources that are available. Governor Abbott's focus from the beginning has been on the health and safety of Texans. Early on, he issued a series of waivers and resolutions to ensure that Texans had the medical supplies and equipment and facilities needed. In addition, he issued waivers to help some of our small businesses, waivers to help our restaurants, allowing them to sell alcohol with pickup orders, waiving trucking regulations so that they could deliver needed resources, waiving some of the rules and regulations, as Commissioner Dermerson mentioned, so that unemployed individuals would not have to wait in order to apply. In addition to that, he requested a disaster declaration from the Small Business Administration, which would allow Texas businesses access to those programs in the CARES Act that you mentioned, Chairman McCaul, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, the advance that went along with that, a $10,000 advance for those loans, and then the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. As you mentioned, $350 billion. The latest numbers I had on Tuesday was that they had already issued over 1 million loans, and about $275 billion have been allocated already through 4,664 lenders. So the information I have is that as of right now, that Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program has been closed. They are continuing to process the loans that they have that have already been submitted and will be processing those. But for right now, they expect to be running out of those funds. So the next phase of the program is going to be critically important. So that disaster declaration that allowed Texas businesses to take advantage of these programs, we started doing a series of webinars together by invitation with the Texas Workforce Commission through the local workforce development boards, communicating with Texas employers and Texas small businesses, helping them to navigate these programs, where to apply, how to get resources and assistance. We had our first small business webinar yesterday with more than 3,000 participants, about 4,000 people registered for that. So there is definitely a need for these programs and a need for additional information and resources to help our small businesses through this time.
Well, thank you, Adriana. And I want to commend you and the commissioner and Governor Abbott for his tremendous leadership in this very difficult time. It is unprecedented, Commissioner. I think the last time the world has seen anything like this was in 1918 during the Spanish flu, which impacted about 50 million people worldwide. Let me just say before I get into questions that a lot of people out there have, I think the whole point of the CARES Act is to try to keep our small business economic engine afloat during this hard time that we know we're going to be facing as this virus, COVID-19, peaks in the next couple of weeks. We were hopeful we'll see a decline starting in May. And then when we begin the economic rebound, we want to make sure that those small businesses are still in place and that people are still on the payroll. The worst thing that could happen is allow them to go under, and then we have no economic engine to turn back the economy, turn it back on. And so with that, again, thank you. I know the governor's got an announcement today. Feel free to give a sneak peek of that if you'd like to. If not, I totally understand. But the first question I have is, as we receive calls from individuals who are attempting to apply, can you share what the Texas Workforce Commission is doing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we've had a number of calls. I mean, the highest amount, I remember, they said on one day, 1.7 million calls that had come in. I think the highest that we've ever had was 60,000 calls. And so it's been phenomenal in that regard. But we're now open 7 days a week, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's something that's new beginning April, and that started April the 10th, except for national holidays. And so that extended hours should help alleviate some of the calls that are coming through. We've added an additional 400 phone lines as well, and 300 more will be added in that aspect. We had 4 call centers here at the Texas Workforce Commission that we were handling claims with traditionally. To that point, we've actually added an additional 4 other call centers. And so we have private sector vendors that are coming in to help on that end. And so those call centers are standing up as well. And we've reassigned a number of staff members. We have individuals from the legislative body that their team's actually helping out. And that's something that's new, as well as other agencies asking for us helping in there. So a number of volunteers, and we've increased the hiring of staff as well, all to try to make sure that folks are in a position to get in to get their questions answered. What we want to make sure that folks know at the end of the day is that everybody will be assisted. If we have to backdate or any of those things, we're going to answer those questions, and no one will be left hanging in that regard. We're trying to do it as fast as we can, and we're working to do that.
Well, that's an amazing number of calls coming in, and I applaud you for your capacity to answer all those calls. And of course, this is a two-way street, federal, state, and local. And I always love to hear ideas from my state leaders about what we need to be doing more at the federal level. Adriana, from the governor's perspective?
From the governor's perspective, we also have seen an increase in call in our constituent communications. We have allocated staff in different locations to help answer some of these calls that are coming in. Our small business group, of course, is extremely busy, not just participating in webinars, but actually answering phone calls, emails, letters that we are receiving. We are also assisting with the governor's supply chain strike force. So that was one thing I neglected to mention. The governor stood up a supply chain strike force that is headed up by one of the executives from Dell, their global supply chain chief operations officer. And their job is to help secure critically needed medical equipment, supplies, and volunteer services to make sure that we have the medical and healthcare capacity to help manage this critical health situation we're in. And so some of the things that our team has been doing is assisting. What we've seen is some of our small manufacturers are shifting from what they had been manufacturing in the past to manufacturing PPE, for instance. And in order to do so, they needed to secure new plastic suppliers or new supplier for some other material. So our team has been helping to do some matchmaking in that regard and make sure that they've got the supplies that they need so that they can pivot and start manufacturing the much needed PPE.
I think the private sector has really stood up to the plate on this. And a lot of clothing store manufacturers have come together to make the PPE, and we were able to form that coalition to help out. And I'm really glad you mentioned supply chain. And for those who don't really understand what that means buying equipment from outside the United States. What is that, chain of supply? And I think the biggest eye opener from this whole crisis has been the fact that we're so dependent and so reliant on countries like China for our medical supplies, and particularly PPE. When we were trying to get the test kits out, and then the PPE was such an issue, we can't ever go back to where we were before. We have to be self-reliant. We have to manufacture more in the United States because to do otherwise makes us vulnerable to another power like China. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways, I think, and lessons learned. And I'm so glad to see the governor, show that kind of leadership to already have a task force on that issue. And I look forward to working with you on that issue. Second question I have is, what has the Texas Workforce Commission done to increase their capacity to intake claims?
It's similar to some of the things that I answered before, where we increased our work days from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in terms of the work hours, but we've also added a chat box. That's something that's new that we've named Larry in honor of our former executive director. But that chat box has answered a number of questions, and so we're utilizing technology to make sure that we are in a position to serve our constituent base. I have an opportunity to represent the employers here in the state. Commissioner Julian Alvarez represents the public, and our chairman Brian Daniels represents the public. Julian Alvarez actually represents labor, and so we're helping out in that regard. So we're on the employer side. We're making sure that we're providing legendary customer service for our employees. And so the chat box, a number of those new initiatives that we have out there, those are things that we're putting in place in addition to the additional call centers and the like to be responsive to our Texas constituents. That's
excellent, Commissioner. And I think one of the takeaways I found is that in this whole experience is that, while I always prefer, in-person one-on-one or with groups, briefings and talks, we can use technology to our advantage now. I have found that I can probably reach out to more people right here in my home using technology than I could ever do, in person. Not to say that in person's, I always prefer that, but I really, it's going to be one of those things we're going to look back on and think, you can do a lot of great things through technology. And I'm really glad to hear you say, sir, that you're using technology to your advantage with the Texas Workforce Commission. The next question I have is, what support can you offer to employers?
A lot of support to employers in combination with the governor's office and the use of technology. When she mentioned 3,000 individuals that they had online, that's the use of technology. They would probably normally have maybe 400 or 500 folks for a governor's small business conference, but 3,000, those numbers are phenomenal. That's the use of technology. What we're doing here, these virtual town hall meetings, and the chairman, again, just thank you for hosting this. This allows us to reach out there, and we've done this with a number of industry association groups, chamber of commerce organizations, some elected officials, and the like, and it allows us to really get out there. We want to answer those questions that those employers have, and I, as some leadership, that you're exhibiting with this type of a call that allows us to take that message to our employers, because there are questions out there and we don't want to assume that they know the answers to those questions. We want to make sure that we're taking care of business on our end, and that's what we're doing to be a benefit to our Texas employers.
Yeah, I think a good example, I had a telephone town hall with Travis County Judge Susan Eckhart, and we were able to touch 50,000 people in Travis County through that one telephone town hall. So that is amazing. Adriana, from the governor's perspective on what support you can offer to employers?
Sure. So as Commissioner Dermerson mentioned, getting the message out as far and as wide as possible. This is a very stressful time for a lot of our business owners, a lot of our constituents. And so we're trying to get that information out. What's available? What can you do? What are the resources? Who do I call? How do I get through? We've compiled all of that information together, and we are providing that on our social media channels, but on our website at gov.texas.gov/business. There is a coronavirus learn more button that takes you to a page that has all of the resources that we have compiled together from the comptroller, from the Workforce Commission, from any source that we can find. And we're putting that all together in one place. We have FAQs available. There's just a lot of need for information. This is a very fluid time. As you're aware, Chairman, as programs become available and federal guidelines become available, that's new information that needs to get out. And so we are staying on top of all of that to try to be sure that our Texas businesses have the most up-to-date information as possible. We also have it translated in Spanish. So for our business community, for those who are more comfortable in Spanish, that language is available as well. But this is an all hands on deck moment, from the calls coming in to the Workforce Commission, to the calls coming into our office, to the small business development centers across the state and the workforce solution boards across the state. Everybody is working together, speaking, from the same page, working towards the same goal, and that's to help make sure that our economy stays stable through this critical time.
And I know you're the head of economic development and tourism. I know one of the kind of original heartbreaks to this whole thing was having to see the Houston rodeo being shut down. And then, of course, in Austin, the South by Southwest event. And I know those were tough decisions to make. I do think in hindsight, as hard as that was, it was probably the right decision to stop and flatten the curve, of this virus. Also, I wanted to ask you about the distressed industries provision in the bill, $150 billion. You talk about economic development, tourism, the airliners, the hospitality included in that. And again, we were able to get the energy sector, which is really the backbone of the Texas economy, is energy. Energy funds our universities. Energy is, we're the largest exporter in the world. And I think they went through a double hit with the economy, but also this flooding of the market by Russia and China and Saudi Arabia, which I'm glad to see OPEC resolving that. But can you talk about the implementation of that $150 billion?
Sure. Well, this is absolutely a 1-2 punch in the energy industry. Not only with the situation with Saudi Arabia and Russia, but then you have the lack of travel and airlines not flying, and so all that jet fuel that is not moved, and then people not driving or traveling as much and teleworking from home. So you're seeing great decline in the demand. So that is absolutely an issue. And the hospitality and tourism industry is one of the largest industries in Texas. And for some communities, that is their livelihood, is the tourism industry and hospitality. So the decline in tourism is significant. It affects communities large and small. It will affect some more than others. The tourism industry has estimated that the impact of the coronavirus on tourism and hospitality will be 7 times what it was for 9/11, which is significant. We are working with our industry partners. As you know, our tourism division markets Texas as a tourism destination. Outside of Texas, across the country, across the world, we have halted that advertising. But from a social media perspective, what we're doing is we've shifted our focus to more of the beauty of Texas, reminding everyone how beautiful the Big Bend area is, and our beaches, and our, the hill country, and the beauty of our landscapes, so that even though you can't travel right now, we want to inspire you for when you are able to travel, which we hope will be at some point soon. And so our hashtag has always been Texas to do, and now we've added hashtag Texas to do soon. So not traveling right now, but sometime soon, be inspired by what is out there, and start, maybe planning for some future time.
That's excellent. We want to keep the airlines afloat as well. One creative approach we took in the CARES Act was we set aside monies for domestic violence victims. In Austin, we have the National Domestic Violence Hotline. I've been working with the Vice President and the task force to see if we can have a creative solution to this money that was done under the auspices of the Violence Against Women's Act, to work with the hospitality industry, the hotels, in our state, to provide shelter from victims of domestic violence. And that, to me, that would help with the hotel vacancies, but also gives the victim of domestic violence, a place to go. What we found under this sort of lockdown, if you will, is that the calls for domestic violence have really gone way up. And so I just want to throw that out there as something that we've been working on. I look forward to working with you, Adriana, and the governor's office on that as well.
Absolutely.
And
thank you.
And lastly, the Commissioner, what other alternatives exist to avoid layoffs?
I think
We've lost him.
we lost him.
I think our time's kind of. Maybe you want to, do you have a response to that?
I'm sorry, he was calling me at the same time that you asked the question.
Okay. That's technology.
I know. I think what may have happened is that the meeting ran out of time on his end. Yeah. But I hit the okay button. But Congressman, can you repeat that question?
It's what other alternatives exist to avoid layoffs?
Well, one program that I think he would have mentioned, and I hope that he's able to come back on, is the shared work program. So rather than lay off people, you can reduce hours and share a position between multiple people, and that might help to avoid some of those layoffs. One of the things that, a lot of retailers and restaurants, the restaurant industry has been hit very, very hard, of course. Restaurants, doing things in a different way. You can't have people come and sit down, but you can do pickup orders or to-go orders. We've seen a lot of increase in services like Favor, doing a delivery and delivery to your door. I know that, some of our, restaurants in our neighborhood that were dine-in only are now, providing quarantine kits. You go and you pick up a meal of the materials, and then you take it home and you cook it yourself. So there have been some creative ways for some of our small businesses to stay alive and keep their employees working.
Yeah, I think I was able to work the technology. I think we may be having the Texas Workforce Commission back. Are you back? I think
There's Brian.
Hi, Brian. There he is.
Brian, can you hear us?
Well, I know our time is wrapping up, so to stay on schedule, Adriana, thank you so much for joining us today, and I want to applaud your efforts and the governor and all the efforts of Commissioner Dermerson and the Texas Workforce Commission. Just to close, this is it's historic. It's something that none of us have ever been through unless you were alive in 1918. And we are going to, I think the curve is going to peak in about 2 weeks. And then I think you're going to see a flattening and a decline in May going into the summer months. I know everybody is anxious to get back to work. We want to do it in a safe, professional way, but we also want to make sure everybody gets tested, which will help us get the workforce back to the workplace. In the meantime, we are telecommunicating. And also, I think there are a lot of interesting treatments and therapies on the horizon that I think will calm down the American people. So with that, you know, just that we're all, everybody's in my thoughts and prayers. We're Texans, and we help each other get through times of crisis, whether it be, you know, hurricanes or after 9/11. And we're going to work together as Texans and Americans, and we're going to get through this tough time, and we're going to be stronger because of it. So thanks to all of you for being here today.
Thank you.
And God bless.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.